I'm Rob Lucuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Oscar winner Barry Jenkins, who is nominated for a DGA award, along with his team for directing limited series The Underground Railroad. Barry, you directed all 10 episodes. That is a huge undertaking for a series like this that is so visually, orally stunning and immersive to experience. What are the benefits of taking the reins for the entire project like you did?
Thank you for having me, first of all. The benefits were our show was a road movie. And so Tuso Mbedu, who plays our main character, Cora, she kind of goes through the whole journey, but every time she reaches a new state, there's a whole new environment, a whole new world, a whole new cast of characters, and yet it's meant to feel like the same journey. And so I think having one director, a singular vision, helps sort of unite the aesthetic, but also unite the feeling of the show throughout that journey. I think the other part of it was, if something happened in the filming of episode 2 or episode 3, and there was a spark or there was some kind of like off ramp that we thought was worth taking, being the sole director of the show, you sort of knew where the stitching had to be to get us back onto the main thread of the show. So I think both from a craft standpoint, but also from a story standpoint, an emotional standpoint, it was awesome.
Yeah, one of the qualities I most admired about this series and your work generally is the artistry. For example, it opens with Cora falling in slow motion, lensed beautifully by DP James Laxton, and this gorgeous composition by Nicholas Britell. It's one of the many examples where your more impressionistic style of filmmaking really shines through. It subverts our expectations by giving us imagery that is like breathtaking, beautiful, but obviously quite horrifying at the same time. Why do you like telling stories in this often like hallucinatory and poetic way?
I think part of it is intentional. I think that particularly with these characters, making a show about my ancestors, about these the enslaved, typically they're frozen in time. They're kind of frozen in time, and also they predate most of the technology that we have for capturing people's images. And so in recreating these images and reanimating their stories, it kind of felt like we wanted to allow the audience to get past this almost frozen in time, very surface depiction that we have of them. These people who this thing happened to in the past that are frozen only in this moment, and allow the audience to go inside their consciousness. And I don't know, when I think of images, and this kind of goes back to the things I've been working on the last 5 years, they've all been adaptations. And so as I'm reading the work of Colson Whitehead or reading the work of James Baldwin, I'm seeing things, and those things aren't tethered to a narrative. They aren't linear. And I think James and Nick and Alex Bickle, our colorist, they just do a really great job of going on that journey with me. And yeah, the opening of the show was something that I really thought long and hard about, but not trying to unlock it mathematically, just trying to see which images were most potent that would grab me, that we could recreate. And yeah, that was a really fun one to shoot.
Yeah, it's really unforgettable. It stuck with me all this time. And then we go straight to the last episode, and it ends with Cora and Molly emerging from the Underground Railroad and heading west to an unknown future. In your heart of hearts, where do you think they end up? What do you want audiences to think or believe about Cora's destiny?
I think that progress is a direction, not a destination. And I think it's why she couldn't arrive at a fixed place. I think the story of Black people in this country, since our first origins here, the first time we set foot on these shores, has always been about this continual sort of journey towards progress, towards, it used to be towards equality, towards personhood, towards so many things. And so it felt like the ending of the show had to be a direction, not a destination. It's interesting, we were scouting for that location because we ended up filming the entire show in the state of Georgia, and we got there. And it was really wonderful to see how 10 people could stand in one place and take a completely different feeling from it. I described it, I was like, oh, this is like Tarkovsky, this is death. They've come out of the zone like Stalker, and they've arrived at this place of death. But she makes this offering by planting her birthright, by planting these seeds, and the next person to come behind her will have sustenance. And so that was how we arrived at the image and how we arrived at the ending. And I think if I want audience to take anything away from the show, it's that the journey continues, and that progress is a direction, not a destination.
Yeah, absolutely, which is so true to this very day. You touched on this earlier, but the show allowed the audience to feel, to empathize in some very unusual ways. Like, at the end, the last episode entitled Mabel, that discloses what happened to Cora's mother, who didn't intentionally abandon her as a baby.
Mhm.
That's so heartbreaking. Just thinking about it now, like, that was devastating to watch. And I felt really sad for them, but I felt really helpless and powerless generally. It was a feeling that I'm not used to feeling. And I'm wondering if that was the intention, to evoke and elicit this empathy towards these enslaved people that we don't get to empathize with often, as you say, because we see them in textbooks. We don't see them as people because we don't share their experience.
Yeah, I think the empathy, my hope would be that it's instinctual, it's innate, it's something just as human being to human being, but it's something that arises organically. It's why I wanted to tell this show as a limited series, not as a feature. When I first spoke to Coulson, I wanted the audience to experience the entire spectrum of emotions that a character like Cora might experience. I love that she's just a woman, she's not famous, she wasn't some notable abolitionist, and those people are great and we should tell their stories. But I love that we could turn the camera on any face in the frame and they would have a story worth spending 10 hours with. And over the course of those 10 hours and experiencing life through their eyes, walking them out in their shoes, that yes, it would activate the empathy in the audience member. And if that meant at times they had to feel the sense of hopelessness, of claustrophobia, they would feel that. But also this woman gets to make love, and that they would also feel to go from someone who has no control over their person to someone who has absolute control, that she can reject love and choose when to accept it, just how wonderful that might be. And then hopefully coming out of the show to realize this is worth fighting for. Everyone should get to experience this no matter where they start.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final question is, obviously the series subject matter, it's an important one. I'd love to know more briefly what you think about this emerging narrative in social and political discourse nationwide about how, what we teach kids at school, particularly about topics from history that might be uncomfortable, like slavery and racism and its legacy and lasting systemic impact. Are you hoping that people will see this series for what it is? It's a way for us to go back and look and appreciate what these people went through.
I do. I think as someone who works, in this art form, it's interesting. The two original images of cinema are a train coming towards the camera and D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. And I think taking this book written by a Black man, fictional, but based on the truthful experience of my ancestors about a train running underground, built and piloted by Black folks, carrying them to freedom. I think in a certain way, I hope that says to anyone participating in this discourse that these stories have to be told continually. Why? Because for the past 4 years, 4.5 years, 5 years, I've heard the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Make America great again, as though America has always been great in the continuum of experience of this country. And yet I can point to my ancestors and know for a fact, America was not great for them. And they lived in the time of these very great documents, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and yet still America was not great for them. I think if we're always reminded of that, or always aware of that, at the very least, when we hear something like that, we can contextualize it and unpack it in a way that it doesn't have the power to do some of the things that it has done.